You are not your art. What you are putting up there is what you want people to see, what you are sharing with them as an artist. What's really important is to acknowledge that you come from a place of privilege and then see how you can use that for good. I want my child to experience joy. Like
Yeah.
that's the baseline. But I also don't want her to waste her potential, because it's very easy to say that, oh, you've had a hard day, just watch a few hours of TV to kind of set it off. And then you realize that you're going down that path. When we grew up, this is what we grew up in. But now, as parents, like, I have a daughter who's almost 14, and he has a 4-month-old. So we are like, what is it that we want to pass on, right? And I'm sure this is something that you grapple with as well. How do we create frameworks for them to excel without putting unnecessary pressure on them?
Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the First 90%. Today, I'm super excited to have two very talented musicians here with me from a family that is literally a legendary family in music. And I'll let them introduce themselves, Bindu and Ambi Subramaniam. Welcome, Bindu and Ambi.
Thanks so much for having us, Raghav. I mean, we've been aware of your work and a big fan of all the cool things that you do. So it's excited to be here. We're excited to be here and have this conversation with you. Both of us are musicians, and we have two bands and a few other projects that we run. One is the Thayir Sadam Project, Thayir Sadam meaning curd rice in Tamil. And the other is SubraMania, which is a play on our last name, Subramaniam. And the third is SaPa.
Yeah, very, very happy to be here.
So, welcome Bindu, welcome Ambi. And before the show started, we were just talking about how you guys are doing so many different things, and it's just so hard to keep up with you guys. So, so if you guys can tell us a little bit more about all the amazing things that you guys do.
Yeah, so SaPa, or the Subramaniam Academy of Performing Arts, and I think we've spoken about that a few times because we're very aligned in terms of how we want to make things better for the next generation. So through SaPa and SaPa in schools, we work with kids from the age of 1.5 all the way into adulthood. And there are two things that we do primarily. One, through our centers, is we're looking to create the next generation of musicians. And how we do that is by giving them exposure from a very young age to different kinds of music. So it's classical music, it's contemporary music, and instrumental vocal, but in a way that is exciting for young minds. So the music is very authentic, but the methodology is new and fun. So that's what we try to do at SaPa. And through SaPa in schools, we want music for all. So we want everyone to have access to high quality music education as part of school curriculum. And we've been doing that for about 10 or 11 years now.
Awesome. So both of you guys, obviously, for those who don't know, they are Ambi and Bindu are siblings, brother and sister. And you guys come from literally a house of legends, right? So you were part of a family. Your dad, and by the way, congratulations to the family for your father winning the Padma Vibhushan this year.
Thank you.
L. Subramaniam, world famous violinist. And of course, your mom, Kavita Krishnamurthy, famous Bollywood singer. So you guys grew up in this legendary family. You guys had your entire childhood in this family, right? And I have so many questions about that. But the first one that I will ask is, how did that shape your music career? How did that, and maybe both of you can answer individually in terms of how did it help you develop an interest in music? Was it something that was just taken for granted that you guys will become musicians? Did you guys have a choice? How did that shape?
Well, I think we had a lot of exposure to great music. And I think one amazing thing is we were able to see, I mean, not only our parents, but their friends and colleagues who are incredible musicians from different genres. And then I think it became quite clear to us when we were able to see them off stage without the bright lights and without all of that, the amount of work that they still would put in after they had become famous or celebrities and all of that. So I remember this one a concert in particular. I think I was maybe 16 or 17, and we had this incredible saxophone player, Ernie Watts, who had won multiple Grammys and all of that. So he had come to India for the first time, and he was playing with us, and we had finished sound check, and I was getting a bit cranky because I was like, I haven't eaten on time, I'm tired, and I need to rest before the show, everything. Then I go to his room and I'm like, come, let's go, we'll go and eat and we'll get some rest. So he's like, Ambi, it's okay, you rest. I need to practice my scales. And in that 1 minute, I'm like, oh, okay. So I think that kind of environment has definitely helped. And I think we've been very lucky to see that and kind of find our own voices. Because I think, like, obviously she sings, I play the violin, we're doing things in the same space as our parents, but we never wanted to kind of be copies or of that, but we wanted to kind of find our own voice and do our own thing. So I think we've been lucky to have had that environment where we felt comfortable to kind of do our own thing and pursue things that have been interesting to us.
Yeah, I mean, I remember there was this whole phase of Ambi's childhood, right? Like from when he was maybe 5 to 15 or 16. Every time he'd meet like a famous musician, his first question would be like, how much do you practice? Right? Because I think as a child, you try to kind of numerically quantify like how much or how many or how do you do this? But I mean, for us, growing up in the family that we did was very normal because for every child, right, your experience is normal. You don't realize that what you're doing or what your circumstances are different from anyone else's. So this is your benchmark of normal is what you grow up within, right? So for us, our childhood was very normal, but that normal entailed an insane amount of hard work every day. And I think that's the thing that we took away from our parents, that whatever you do, what you can control is the amount of work that you put in. And that's something that translates across, right? So if it's music, you're not in control of how famous you become. But you are in control of how much work you put in to further your art. And everything beyond that is not real. What is real is the work that you put in. And I think that's something that both of us and our brother, who's a surgeon, have really carried forward, that what we can control is the hard work. So for us, and whether it's SaPa, building an organization, or whether it's creating music or something, you realize that, okay, I need to put in the hard work, and you benchmark a very high level, right? Because you're surrounded by greatness, you realize that mediocrity is not an option. So those, I think, is really much.
And I think, I mean, your question about whether we were forced into music or any of that, I don't actually imagine it or remember a time when I didn't see myself becoming a violinist or a musician. I don't know when that started or who planted the idea, but it just was kind of natural. So like I think that environment was there. I enjoyed doing it, and then at some point I'm like, okay, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. So
I think my experience was a little different in the sense that I don't know, I read too many John Grisham novels as a kid, or, I don't know whether this was like this born in the US kind of thing, but I always assumed that I was going to be a lawyer. And my parents sort of supported this idea of, you should be a lawyer. And I was a lawyer for Halloween once, right? So carrying around a briefcase full of candy, this is how serious I was about it. But music was still very much a part. Like I was performing, I've always been performing. I've always been writing. So music has always been there, but it took a while for me. And I think that was actually when I was in law school for me to realize that, this is the same thing. Like this music that I'm doing can actually be my career. So I don't know why it took me a really long time to join those dots.
Do you remember a point when you said that, okay, maybe music is what it is then?
So I realized that I didn't want to live a life without music. And then I also realized that law is much more boring than the movies and the books make it out to be, right? So they sort of make this 100 hours a week of working in an air-conditioned office seem like the height of life. And then I did a couple of internships here in Mumbai, in fact, and I was like, wow, I really don't want to do this.
Music is so much more fun. Yeah. You said a line where you said that mediocrity was not an option, right? And to a lot of parents today, that can be a source of inspiration, but it can also be a source of stress. Uh, as a child, if you're already thinking that mediocrity is not an option, is that a source of inspiration or is that a lot of pressure? And how do you avoid, especially the pressure that comes from being in such an illustrious family?
Right. I mean, that's a really valid one, and honestly, something that we discuss because when we grew up, this is what we grew up in. But now, as parents, like I have a daughter who's almost 14, and he has a 4-month-old. So we are like, what is it that we want to pass on, right? And I'm sure this is something that you grapple with as well as a father of a young child. So how do we create frameworks for them to excel without putting unnecessary pressure on them? And I think one of the things that we chanced upon, or that we actually spend a lot of time developing, is how do we look at excellence as a natural consequence of something that is fun for them to do?
Yeah.
Right? And I think when we grew up, a lot of this, like when you had to go for music class, it was very much you have to sit, you have to listen, you have to obey. So and even in a school environment, it would be like the teacher would sing, stand in the front of the classroom, and then the children have to repeat, and then the teacher will say, no, you've done it wrong, and you have to repeat again, and then it's like, there's that boy in the back, and he's talking, and be quiet, and you go stand up, and like, it's just this experience is traumatic for everybody. And how do you achieve, like when everybody's on edge, how do you achieve excellence? There's no joy in that. So if we look at excellence and the way to reach excellence, this is where the work needs to be done.
Yeah.
Right? How do you create an environment or a methodology where excellence is natural, right? Where you feel joy, where the child feels joy. So if you're giving them, for example, one of the things that we do is pattern recognition in music, where we're playing a piece of music for kids and we give them a little bit of a puzzle without any explanation, like dots and dashes and up and down. And you see young kids just having a lot of fun, saying that, okay, I'm going to make some connection between this and this. I don't know what it is. I don't know what the right answer is. But can you play that song again? Because I want to figure this out. And then they're playing it 5 or 10 times. And by the end of it, they figured out that this is how the pattern works. But then you pull down the lyrics, and the kids are able to sing the song because they don't realize that you've gotten them away from this, oh, this is a hard song that you need to learn how to sing. And you're just focusing them on, this is a pattern that you have to solve. But they've actually heard it 10 times. But if you ask kids to sit quietly and listen to something 10 times,
it won't happen.
It's a traumatic experience for everybody.
Right.
So you're reaching excellence, but you're kind of, making sure that there's joy. And I think as parents, that is one thing that we cannot discount, the need for us to give our children joy, right?
I think that's just a fantastic point, right? Because what I hear you say is that if it's fun, then the excellence will come naturally anyway, right? As long as you're putting in the work. Yeah?
And I think if it's fun, you will put in the work.
Yeah, I mean, then it's not work. It's then just, that's something.
It's the Mark Twain example of painting the fence.
Yeah. Awesome. So you also touched upon the point of putting in the work a lot of times. Like that's what you can control. You cannot control your fame, but you can control the amount of work that you're putting in. And my question in regards to that is your talent because of the amount of work that you put in, or is it because of the genes that you inherited? What is the answer to that, evergreen question, nature versus nurture?
So, I mean, this is something that we have kind of been like waving a flag about for like a decade now, because we come from this family of musicians where everyone is like, oh, it's in your genes, and I'm sure it flows in your blood. I'm sure your daughter was born in the hospital singing, and this and that. But for us, I'm not discounting that there is that 10-20% of talent, right? That is the difference between a good sports person and an Olympic gold winning medalist. I'm not saying that there is no scope for talent, right? There is a difference between good and great, or someone who's winning at a state level and an Olympic medalist, right? But I think that sometimes we place too much effort on nature. because a lot of what we do comes down to what we are exposed to. And I mean, we've seen that at SaPa, where, you see kids who come in at 10, 11 years of age. It's hard, right? It is much harder if you've never been exposed to music. But we see kids who come in at age 3, and then you see parents come in and say, we don't come from a family of musicians. We don't know what music is. We don't know how to do this. But what those parents do that I really appreciate is they ask the questions, right? And for us, when we started creating our baby music books, we started putting in notes to parents, because we realized that with things like classical music, there's always this little insecurity of feeling stupid, like with the parents, right? I don't know what to ask. So, for example, a very simple thing is, in classical music, both Carnatic and Hindustani, you need a tanpura or an app or a shruti box to give you your basic pitch. You match your pitch to that, and then you sing everything based on that, right? And this is something that is taken for granted absolutely in families that have traditionally learned music. But for families that don't have music, they're like, why do I need this? Let me see if my child is interested.
Then
I can buy it later.
Yeah.
Right? But what happens is your foundation is a little shaky. It'll be harder for that child to match pitch than another child. Now, where does talent come into this? It's exposure, right? So, and then when you start telling kids, so what we did was we got little stuffed animals and we put the shruti boxes inside. So we said, don't worry about anything else, but this is your practice buddy. Whenever you're practicing, keep your practice buddy in your lap. Right? So then you're hearing this and the parents are like, okay, fine, this makes sense. And then our note to parents is, you need this because it helps you match pitch. End of story. You don't have to ask questions. You don't have to feel stupid. We're telling you this. And then you see that these kids who come in at age 3, by age 5, right, or 6, you can't tell the difference between this child came from a musical family versus this child came from a non-musical family. So really, it's about creating the right environment. And I believe that there's a baseline that we have to create for everybody, right? And there's the amount of natural raw talent, which is there at some level. But it's the hard work, right? So you create the environment, you create a situation for hard work, and some children are able to work harder than others, right? And then talent kicks in. But it cannot 100% be nature. I think we tend to really think that things run in the family. Like you say, oh, this person's dad was a great doctor, he's a great doctor too. But like what you would have seen skeletons in your house as a kid, right? Your dining table conversation. How does business run in?
As a 2-year-old, you'll get a stethoscope set, and you'll get.
we're creating these environments, right? How does business run in families? Because your discussions over dinner are cash flows, my friend. This is what it is. You're creating these environments for children to thrive in certain areas.
You want to add something, Ambi?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that whole environment makes a huge difference. I think we've benefited from that greatly, where we've seen, say you go to a concert, you finish the concert, and then after that there's a kind of analysis of what happened, or like, okay, this if you watch this, they probably changed what they were going to do because of this, or this was probably a good choice, this maybe didn't make sense. So then you start analyzing things a little differently. So when you go on stage, or when you're playing, or when you're presenting something, then you don't start from zero. And I think sometimes when you're trying to figure it out by yourself, you may take way longer, and then you're like, I wish somebody had told me this like much earlier. So those things make a huge difference, and we do see that at SaPa, where especially with young kids, we try to create that community, and so when they have that community and they're creating that environment where they're sitting together and performing and making music, then that whole nature versus nurture kind of goes out the window. But yeah, I think that makes a huge difference.
In terms of putting in the hard work, right? Does that also come into play when you are in that kind of a family, in that kind of environment? Because your parents are putting in a lot of hard work to reach where they have, right? So does that also get ingrained that it's just natural to put in that much amount of work? Because for things that are not related to school, for others, it might just be a little bit unnatural to put that much effort into things like music, sports, arts, etc. Or am I wrong in that?
Yeah, no, I think that makes a huge difference, because also, like, when you're in that environment and we've been told, okay, you need to put in 3 hours, 4 hours, 5 hours a day doing this. And there is a kind of understanding, like when you see everybody working like that, that becomes your normal, and that's what you're used to. I remember when we went to the St. Petersburg Conservatory in Russia, and that's one of the best music schools in the world. What was very fascinating for me, like they had pianos and they had violins all in open areas, and they were like, yeah, all our students practice 10 hours a day. Because it's just so normal.
And everybody's doing it.
Everybody's doing it. So if you see everybody around you practicing 10 hours a day, you will also practice 10 hours a day. Or maybe if you want to be a little better, you'll practice 10 and a half hours a day.
Community is a big part of setting the tone, because there is in the early years, yes, the immediate family is a huge influence, but as they grow a little older, it's also their peer group. So you have to be really aware of who you're surrounding yourself with and who you're surrounding your kids with, because that's
we used to, like, my dad used to get so many DVDs of musicians and all of that. I think the main idea there was for us to see what is out there, and one, probably realize how much we have to work, but also to inspire us and like to see, okay, look at what all these people around the world are doing. If you want to be at that level, then that's what you need to put in. So I think it's also kind of opening your mind to what else is out there, because sometimes otherwise you're in your own bubble and you may think, okay, what I'm doing is cool, or what I'm doing is whatever. But it's important to kind of be aware of the bigger picture out there.
And as like when Mahati was really young, for me, I was really trying to make sure that I was giving her the right exposure. Like I was trying to, and we didn't have the things that we have today, right? Like a dozen years ago, it was a slightly different environment. So I was very sure that I wanted her to listen to only like very high quality music, and like no like bum dancing videos. We're watching only ballet and like any of this. So like for the first few years, the only thing that she would watch on TV that she really ended up liking was the Tchaikovsky Piano Concerto No. 1.
Whoa.
And it's like a 1984 recording or something like that, and it starts with da 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 da. Okay, so for a long time, until she was like 2.5, she thought that the word for TV was da 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 da, like that. So you create these, and she was never deprived. She enjoyed that. So it's, if you can create an environment where you're giving them high quality stuff in a way that is fun to them, you're not depriving them, right? And another thing that I think some of us as parents who are now doing well, right? We want our kids to have an easier life than we did, right? So there's this balance of, how do I make my child a 1%? Or no, I don't want to do that. I want to give them an easy life. Like, I don't want them to struggle. I worked hard so my child doesn't struggle. And then that's another thing that you start playing with, right? But if you can find that middle space where you're giving them high quality things that are entertaining and engaging for them, then you're pushing them towards achieving their potential, while at the same time not taking away their childhood or their joy.
Yeah, but do you think that your childhood was taken away? Because this is another debate, right? When we are saying that don't be the 1%er, or I want you to have an easier life, is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Yeah.
I think it's a very personal choice thing. And I think, like, for me, I see that I want my child to experience joy. Like, that's the baseline. But I also don't want her to waste her potential, because it's very easy to say that, oh, you've had a hard day, just, watch a few hours of TV to kind of set it off. And then you realize that you're going down that path. So, but it's much harder to be a very hands-on parent when you're like running around doing so many things. You're running a business, you're parenting, you're trying to self-improvement. So how do you balance that? So I don't think my childhood was taken away, but I do think that I lived in a different generation than what is there today.
Yeah, and I think especially like for us, we're in the same field. So that comes with its own challenges. And I feel that especially the previous generation was quite different in the sense that I remember when I started playing with my dad, if I played well as a 13-year-old, 14-year-old, people would come up and say, "Oh, you're just like your father. You play just like this and whatever." If you play badly, "Oh, you're nothing like your father." And
Oh man.
this would happen immediately after the show in front of everybody.
Oh really?
Yeah, I've heard both. Like immediately after the show, somebody would come up and say these things, and in my opinion, there's no running away from it. Like whether you want it or not, that's going to happen. Maybe people are a little better now. In the previous I mean, when we were growing up, it was definitely that was the situation. So you can kind of wish it away, but it's going to happen anyway. So I think that is a challenge.
So if you do well, it's because of your genes, and if you don't do well, it's on you.
Yeah, absolutely. So that does happen, and to a lot of our friends also. I think that has been experiences that.
So I have to ask you guys this, right? So what is your take on the nepotism debate?
So I feel like we come from privilege, right? Many of us do, and we all come from different levels of privilege, right? Whether it is your parents owned a business and therefore you figured out how to get into business, or you come from a family of musicians. So I think that we need to acknowledge that all of us have varying levels of privilege. We come from a privilege of having been able to see the greatest artists on stage from a very young age.
Yeah.
Right? And that is unquestionably a privilege. We come from the privilege of being able to travel the world and perform from a very young age. Unquestionably.
So, and when you're saying privilege, you're meaning advantage, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
For
Absolutely.
sure.
That's an advantage, right? And what we have brought into SaPa in schools, how we design our course, how we design our curriculum, everything takes from the experiences that we've had.
Yeah. And we've also seen, like growing up, I've seen so many like violin students or music students coming in to learn from my dad or mom, and they have to change so many things because they've learned things maybe not in the best way. They have to unlearn and relearn. And I remember this one violinist who had come, and he said he practiced like 12 hours a day, and he's put in all this work. And then even at that age, because I had learned a little bit by then, he started playing and I could see there were so many technical things wrong. And the fact that we didn't have to go through any of that, we learned it right the first time, or
Had excellent teachers. And
so that is, of course, a huge privilege.
So I think what's really important is to acknowledge that you come from a place of privilege and then see how you can use that for good. Right? So how can we create a larger platform to replicate the benefits that we've got for everybody? So if we've had access to high quality music education, how do we give that to everybody? I'm not saying that we don't have privilege, because that's ridiculous, right?
No, but what you're saying is that because you have that advantage, this is what I'm understanding, right? You have that advantage, because of which you have a higher probability of being better than somebody who didn't have that advantage, right? But then the opportunities that you will continue to get is because you're actually better, and not because you're from that family. Okay, so let's give Bindu a chance because she's from that family.
Because it's also very easy to get written off. Like, because as he's saying, as a 12 or 13-year-old, you are compared to a parent in their prime, right? So a 12-year-old Ambi is being compared with a 45-year-old or 50-year-old El Subramaniam, who's now a Padma Vibhushan. How fair is that? Like, how many 12-year-olds are you comparing with people at the top of their game? Like, I used to come off stage at 17 and they'd be like, you know, you should try to sing more like Kavita ji, you know? And I'd be like, I'm singing in English. Like, what? And so there's this whole kind of, it is a privilege, but the flip side of that is that you're always being compared, and usually not in a flattering way. Right? And it's much harder, the sort of stuff that you have to deal with. So there is a flip side of all of this, but the way that we've sort of reconciled ourselves with it is look at the good parts of it. Another advantage is we don't get carried away with fame. We've been trashed since we were kids, right? So like, if people say you're not good enough, so when I sit with my teenage students who are songwriters and stuff, and you have to use social media and you have to put yourself out there, I'm like, please remember, I tell them all the time, you are not your art. You know, What you are putting up there is what you want people to see, what you are sharing with them as an artist. But if someone comments on your hair or your person, you are not that. They don't get to have that power over you. Whereas I've seen kids who go on reality shows and they come out the other end, this becomes their entire personality because they haven't had anyone tell them you are not your art. They've not had anyone tell them that you are valid. Like, your validation doesn't come from this. This is not your entire person. Yes, you sing well, that's great. But don't let anyone dictate your self-worth. Like, there's so much that people need to know about this, and I think you get sort of dunked into the deep end when you come from a family of famous people that you can brush off after a while.
So let's talk about the specific kind of music that you guys do, right? I know that you're a violinist, you're a singer, but within the spectrum of, say, vocals, you could have gone into any kind of music. You just mentioned that you were also singing in English, for example. Kavita Krishnamurti, of course, great Bollywood singer, but you are mostly singing, I think, classical.
I learned classical music as a child, like South Indian classical, and I learned Western classical as well. But then I found that my most honest expression was a lot more contemporary English music. Right? And so I hard overcorrected away from, because as a kid I saw that you can either, not by my family, but by other people, like, you've got this great classical tradition here, and this is Bollywood. Like, pick one of these. So be like, no, Mariah Carey. Like, I'm going over there. So pop music was always something that I enjoyed very much, and a very honest form of expression for me. And as a writer, I think in English, I write in English. So it tends to go from there. And then it took me a long time to be okay with bringing back influences from classical music or folk music or world music, and then kind of creating a sound that's my own. And I think Ambi hinted at that a little earlier about how it's great to come from these traditions, but also create a voice or a sound that's uniquely your own.
But what was your motivation towards going in this direction, or being able to? I think a lot of people find it hard because there are so many other external factors involved, including fame, including money, including opportunities, right? And there is a lot of opportunity in music today. Did those factors ever come into your mind, decision making, and how do you stay away from it?
So when we started doing the music that we were told to do, right? Like that, you're taught, you do it. And I think that that's the same for a lot of young musicians. You do what you're taught, you do what you're told. And at some point, you have to figure out how to make the music that you like, because whatever you're doing, right? Whether it's music or running a company or being a sports person or any of the other million things that are out there, if you don't love what you're doing, you're not doing it authentically. And if you're not doing it authentically, at some point, you're going to be found out. So for me, it's really about making the music that I enjoy making the music that feels authentic to me. Yeah. And it does take a while to figure out what that is, right? But you need to have that luxury of experimenting in different places and trying this and trying that, and then coming back and saying, no, okay, I want to do this, or I don't want to do that.
So you got into violin because of your dad.
Of course.
And how did you not get
I did start learning violin. Like all of us as kids, we all learned Carnatic violin, we all learned Western classical violin, we all learned Western piano, we all did Carnatic singing, I also did Western singing. So we all did all of these things.
And then you just found your own.
And then just decided where we wanted to spend more time.
Yeah.
You're saying something.
No, I think it's interesting when we, especially, I mean, coming back to the nature versus nurture, we were exposed, I mean, I was exposed to the violin, exposed to all of that. I mean, who knows, maybe if I spend the same amount of time maybe learning the mridangam or tabla or flute, who knows, I may have been better or worse. Like, it's also the environment that you're in, and you find things that you enjoy. So after learning these things, I kind of like, okay, I enjoy composing, I enjoy playing the violin, and I like to use these things that I've learned in this particular way. So, yeah.
I think once you're a teenager, you start chasing things that you want to know more about, right? For me, I enjoyed like songwriting, and so I studied songwriting and music business at Berkeley. He enjoyed composing, so he tried to figure out a little bit more of that. So, I mean, if you know a little bit about a bunch of things, you can chase the things that are exciting for you.
How was it going growing up in your teenage years? Because I'm sure you guys were very different from the people that you went to school with. Was it normal? Was it scary? Was it like, oh, okay, look how cool I am? What was it?
Definitely not that one. Let me think about the other.
Well, I started playing with my dad regularly when I was 13, and for me, I think that was maybe just a little bit before that. That's when kind of the switch flipped, and I'm like, okay, now I want to become a musician, and I want to be very good at it, and I want to spend all my time there. So I think probably that was the time I was most focused, and probably at that point also trying to figure out what I'm contributing to and how I can make my voice a little different from my father's, because I've also heard this all the time from different people, like, oh, this person's son sounds exactly like him, or this person's daughter sounds like just like her dad or mom, or these kind of things. So I didn't want that. And in a way, like, because sometimes classical music is also kind of very stuck on this concept of gharanas, or in the south there's something called a bani, where you're like, okay, I'm in this great musician school, so you should sound like this, you should sound like that. But then, like, what are you doing? If you're just trying to kind of, so you're obviously taking the amazing work of body of work that person has done, but then you have to add what you want to do. Otherwise, it won't feel like you are making that music. So for me, that was a big kind of thing in my mind of how do I make myself sound like Ambi, and not like this person's son, or this person's under this bani, or under that thing. So I think that was a big struggle in my head.
And also, I mean, in school and stuff, definitely not cool, and I'm sad to say that. But the other thing is, we never got a pass for, oh, you were performing, so it's okay, you don't have to do this. Either at home or at school, we never got a pass. So it would always be like, if anything, these are gaps. Now, you are out doing something else, which is not school, and therefore it is your responsibility to fill this gap. And even with our parents, it would be like, yeah, you were on tour, but that doesn't mean you get to drop out of school, or that doesn't mean, like, why are you not first rank? So
that was definitely
so we never got a pass on any of those things. We didn't have a TV at home until we were like teenagers. And like, I remember my dad used to like walk by the house, and if I was like reading a novel, like even if it was like a Sophie's Choice, like a substantial, he'd be like, why are you reading a storybook? Like, if you have time, you should either be studying or practicing. There is no third thing. So for us, it was really, how do we manage these two different worlds? And I think it's sort of feel like you were struggling in both. And the number of times we'd have like a textbook backstage, or be studying at an airport or something like that, is like very much, you don't get a pass from this just because you're doing that.
But what about like your friends in school? Was it normal with them? How did they look up to you guys because you were performing all over the world?
I think we tried as far as possible to hide that identity, because as kids and teens, you want to fit in as much as possible, right? You want to conform. So you don't want people to know of this like secret identity that you have. Obviously, they know about it at some level, but when you're in school, you're just trying to be one of.
So you were fitting in and
trying to compartmentalize that.
And to that point, like, we were never allowed to have excuses for all of these things. I remember once I had a concert before during my 10th standard study holidays, and I remember not playing very well, but whatever. So we finished the concert, and my dad was there, and then I said, I haven't been practicing too much because board exams are happening, and so I felt like I was a little rusty and everything. He's like, next time announce it to the audience.
Tell the audience.
Tell the audience, today I'm not going to play well because I've had board exams. So please sit through this bad concert of mine.
Yeah.
I'm like, all right then.
Yeah, well, I think that's the thing with people who achieve greatness, right? Because they stand by their work and they cannot accept mediocrity, as you said, right? Yeah. And in terms of now that both of you are parents, what I know that your daughter is already performing in shows because she's 13, going to be 14. I
and
think, right?
she hopped on stage when she was 3, and so it's been like 10 years of her performing now.
So she's already chosen her path, or it's been chosen for her?
Well, I mean, to be really honest, because she comes from a family of musicians, she wants to be an actor.
Okay.
Because she's like, why should I do this thing that you guys are doing? But music has always been a part of her life, and one thing that I'm grateful for is that she's grown up with this community of kids who learned music with her. So her best friends are kids who started learning music with her when they were all 3.
And she enjoys it.
And she enjoys it. So because it's this space of non-competitive excellence. Yeah. So they all practice together, they write together, their compositions are made together, and their silly jokes are all like music-based jokes. It's a large group of nerds. It's really nice. So for her, she's still in that phase where she sees the joy of music. And
I think in that case, like, at least I'm sure it's the same for you, but we want to be there for her as a support, not as this kind of pressure of being part of this family. So if she sits with her friends and comes up with a nice melody or a nice something, and then I like it when she comes to one of us and like, can you help me, like, how do I take this song there? Or can you help me record this? So if we are able to kind of be that support system without like this kind of pressure, like, oh, is your song worthy of being in the SubraMania or whatever, is it as good as your parents or your grandparents?
And in fact, when she was 9, she wrote a song that she really liked, right? And she didn't tell me.
Okay.
So she wrote the song, she figured out the chord, she played the whole thing, and she went to him and she's like, I don't want Amma to know about this. I think she meant it in a nice way, like as a surprise. But she went and recorded the whole song without me being part of it at all. So she's like, this is how it's going to go. This is what I'm going to do. And then she came back to me with the finished audio. And she's like, so what I'm going to do is, in this music video, I'm going to do gymnastics, because she was very keen on being a gymnast then. And this is what I'm going to do. And so this is how the music video looks. And, can we do it? And I'm like, sure, if you put in that initiative, well, 100%, which is very different from dragging her, being like, you're already 9, we need to get you on stage. So it's more following the will of the child at that point. And school was still online then with COVID. And I still remember that she had a math exam that she had to do that day. She was in class 4, right? And we had 2 shoot locations. And she ended up doing her math exam in the car, like with her video on, so her teacher could monitor, because all these kids. And I'm like, look, this is the date that we got for the shoot. This is when the crew is available. And you have practiced, and she had practiced a lot with her coach for the gymnastics bits, and this was the other thing. And like, you have to do your math exam in the car. You have to do your math exam in the car. Like, but unlike my dad, I was not like, you have to get 100%. But I'm like, you have to show up, because you might be 9 years old, but you have made these choices. I did not make these choices. I did. So you are accountable. You have to show up. She did not do well in the exam, but she did it, right? So it's a...
Yeah, and I mean, she took the initiative to do the entire song, everything, right? So that means that she really enjoys it.
Yeah, what I really liked also, like, whenever like she was asking us for help or asking for some guidance and all of that, it wasn't like, here's the thing, can you do whatever and come back. So we kind of sat together, and then I'm like, okay, if we're doing this, shall we do this or shall we do this? Or so her kind of... what we are trying to do is to make her mind work in all these different directions. So if we're kind of helping her, then next time she can do it by herself. She can figure out the things that she wants to do as well.
Yeah. What about in your, you guys have traveled, I think, across the world, 50 plus countries is what I read, performing, and from a very young age. Is there a moment in your childhood, both of you, individually, where you realize, okay, this is something that I'm enjoying so much that I want to do it for the rest of my life? Is that something that happened at a particular event, or was it something that you guys grew into over a period of time?
I think probably around that 13, age of 13 was when I kind of really wanted to become a musician and all of that. I think for me that flip switched when music started becoming very personal to me. So even if there a lot of people on stage and whatever, like I felt like when I was playing, it's me time, and like yes, I love collaborating with people, I love doing all of that, but then when I'm playing and I'm closing my eyes, it's a time where I have to myself. So
and that's in the studio or in front of an audience?
In front of the audience as well. So and I realized that I am somebody who kind of enjoyed the pressure and challenge and all of that. So I felt that I kind of flourished in situations where maybe I was worried that I may not be able to stay afloat unless I give my 100% and work and do this and so for me, I realized that that's something that pushed me and challenged me. So I kind of enjoyed being put in those situations.
Yeah.
I think it was a little different for me, and I sort of eased into it. And for me, what the trigger was to realize was, I think as a child, or when you start hitting adolescence, you start feeling very apprehensive about being in front of people. Like this stage fright really kicks. You don't have it when you're 5 or 6, right? It kicks in properly when you're like 11 or 12, and then you're like, is everyone judging me? Like, what are people going to say? So, and at some point, you realize that everyone in the audience is on your side, right? And that was a huge flip for me, that I'm not here to impress them. Like, my job here is not to impress them. They're already here to have a good time.
Yeah.
Right?
Wow.
And I remember reading this somewhere, that if an actor or a musician or a dancer is really struggling on stage, it's painful for the audience too.
Yeah.
Nobody is coming hoping to see you fail.
Yeah.
Everyone is coming there saying, let's have a good time.
Yeah.
So for me, that was, okay, I'm going to have a good time, and I'm going to make sure that everybody out here has a good time, because that's what they're here for. You're not here to judge me. You're here to have a nice time with me. So how can I make that happen for you? And that's when performing really changed for me. That's when my knees stopped shaking and stopped freaking out.